I know my children were becoming successful long before I realized I was becoming lonely. At first, the two things felt like the same victory. My name is Grace. I am 61 years old. If you ask people about me, they will tell you I am blessed. My son, Michael, lives in Canada. My daughter, Sarah, lives in England. Both have good jobs. Both are building lives that once existed only in prayers. People congratulate me whenever they hear their names. Sometimes they look at me with admiration, sometimes with envy. I smile and thank God. What I never tell them is that some blessings arrive carrying losses you do not see until years later. My husband, David, died 6 years ago, heart attack. One ordinary morning, he left for work. By evening, people were standing in my house, speaking softly and avoiding my eyes. I don't remember much about those first weeks. I remember the funeral. I remember relatives. I remember food I couldn't taste. Mostly, I remember trying not to fall apart because Michael and Sarah still needed me. Michael was finishing university. Sarah was in nursing school, so I did what mothers do. I survived. Not because I was strong, because I had no choice. Everything I had left became about my children. Their future became my purpose. Their success became my mission. I attended seminars, filled forms, joined prayer groups, borrowed money, saved every naira I could. I told myself that if I could give them opportunities, the sacrifices would be worth it. Years later, Michael received an opportunity to move to Canada. The day he told me he could barely sit still, he talked for almost an hour. Plans, flights, documents, scholarships, possibilities. I listened and smiled. The whole time, something inside me was breaking. Not because I wanted him to stay, because I knew life was about to change forever. The morning he left, I woke before sunrise. Neither of us slept much the night before. At the airport, he hugged me tightly. "Mom, I'll call every week." I laughed. "You had better." He smiled. Then he looked away quickly. The way men do when emotions become uncomfortable. For a moment, I almost told him not to go. Not because of him, because of me. Because I was afraid of coming home to an emptier house, afraid of evenings without his voice, afraid of becoming a person who waited for phone calls, but good mothers are supposed to let go. So I smiled. I told him I was proud. Then I watched him disappear. The drive home felt longer than any journey I had ever taken. The real pain didn't come at the airport. It came when I opened the front door. His shoes were still there. His room was still there. His coffee mug was still beside the sink. Everything looked exactly the same, except he was gone. That was the first time I understood how loud one missing person can be. 14 months later, Sarah left too. I told myself it would be easier the second time. I was wrong. When Sarah hugged me goodbye, she cried. I didn't. One of us needed to be strong. After she left, I went into her room. The bed was neatly made, the curtains were open, everything looked untouched. I sat there for almost an hour, just sitting, just staring. The silence felt different now, not temporary, permanent. For the first few months, the calls came exactly as promised. Michael called every Sunday. Sarah called too. Sometimes we talked for over an hour. Michael showed me snow for the first time. I laughed at the size of his winter coat. Sarah complained about cold weather. I reminded her she used to complain when Harmattan arrived. Those calls became the highlight of my week. Every Sunday felt like a small family reunion. I cooked before the calls, cleaned before the calls, prepared stories to tell them, saved questions throughout the week. The calls made the distance feel manageable. Then life happened. Michael became busier. Sarah started working longer shifts. Calls became shorter. At first, I didn't mind. Then they became less frequent. At first, I understood. And they became easier to postpone. At first, I made excuses. Michael is busy. Sarah's tired. Adults have responsibilities. I defended them even when nobody was criticizing them. I never realized I was also defending myself, because admitting the truth hurt. The first Sunday Michael forgot to call, I wasn't upset. I told myself he probably lost track of time the second time. I wasn't upset either. By the third time, I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, then pretending I wasn't. One evening, Michael sent money, a generous amount, far more than I needed.
I stared at the bank alert for a long time. I was grateful, truly grateful, but something inside me hurt anyway. The money solved problems, it just didn't solve the one I actually had. I wanted my son, not his bank transfer. That thought made me feel guilty, so I pushed it away. Months passed, and years, the pattern continued. Messages replaced conversations, updates replaced connection. Money replaced presence. One Sunday after church, I cooked enough food for 4 people. I don't know why. Maybe habit, maybe hope, maybe denial. The dining table looked exactly the way it had looked years earlier. 4 chairs, 4 plates, 4 portions. Only one person arrived to eat me. I sat there staring at the empty chairs. The food suddenly tasted different, not bad, just lonely. After that day, I started noticing things, how often I checked my phone, how quickly disappointment arrived when it stayed silent, how much of my happiness depended on hearing a ringtone. That realization frightened me, because I had spent my entire life taking care of people. Now I was becoming someone who waited. 1 month, 21 days passed without a real conversation. Not messages, not emojis, not forwarded videos, an actual conversation. 21 days. I counted, at first accidentally, then intentionally. Every morning I thought about calling, every evening I didn't. I had made a promise to myself years earlier. I would never become the mother who made her children feel guilty. I would never become the burden. I would never become the reason they avoided answering their phones, so I stayed quiet. And the silence grew heavier. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, came over. She often visited, sometimes with fruit, sometimes with stories, sometimes for no reason at all. We sat outside talking. Eventually, she asked the question everybody asked, "How are Michael and Sarah?" I smiled. "They are doing very well." She nodded. And she asked something nobody ever asked. "And how are you?" The answer should have been simple. Instead, I froze, because I suddenly realized I had no idea. How was I? Lonely, grateful, proud, heartbroken? I didn't know. I had spent so many years talking about my children that I no longer knew how to talk about myself. Mrs. Johnson waited. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." She looked at me for several seconds, not speaking, just looking. Then she nodded slowly, and somehow that made me feel worse. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt unusually quiet. I walked from room to room, Michael's room, Sarah's room, the kitchen, the sitting room. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of people who now live thousands of miles away. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing for a long time. I stared into the darkness. Then a question entered my mind. A question so painful I immediately wished I hadn't thought of it. If something happened to me tonight, who would know first? I already knew the answer, and it wasn't Michael. And it wasn't Sarah. For the first time since my children left, I felt something worse than loneliness. I felt forgotten. The next morning, I woke up ashamed of my own pain. That was the first thing I felt. Shame, not anger, not bitterness. Shame, because what kind of mother feels forgotten by children who are only trying to survive? Michael was in Canada. Sarah was in England. They were not wasting their lives. They were working, struggling, building, becoming. So why did their success feel like a door slowly closing against me? I got out of bed and reached for my phone. Nothing. No missed call, no message. Still, I checked WhatsApp. Still, I checked the network. Still, I checked if the volume was on. Then I hated myself for checking that day. Sarah called. I answered too quickly. "Mom." Her voice sounded tired. Not ordinary tired, the kind of tired that sits inside the bones. "My daughter, are you okay?" She was quiet for a moment. Then everything poured out, her work, her supervisor. The long shifts, the way some people spoke to her like she was invisible until they needed her. The rent, the cold, the loneliness, the pressure to look strong, the fear of admitting she was struggling after everyone had celebrated her leaving. I listened. I held the phone with both hands. I gave her everything I had: advice, prayer, comfort, softness. I reminded her who she was. I told her she was not weak. I told her that starting over in another country can break even strong people. She cried. I cried too, but silently. A mother learns how to cry without interrupting the child who needs her. After 40 minutes, her voice became lighter. "Mom, I always feel better after talking to you." I smiled. "I am here for you." She thanked me. Then she said she had to sleep before her next shift. The call ended. I sat still. The phone remained in my hand. For 40 minutes, I had carried my daughter's pain, gladly, lovingly, completely. But after the call ended, one truth sat beside me in the room. She never asked how I was, not really. She asked at the beginning the way people asked before they continue into what they actually called for. But she did not wait for my answer. And the worst part was not that she forgot. The worst part was that I had trained her to forget. I was always fine, always strong, always available, always ready to listen, always ready to comfort. What else was she supposed to believe? That evening, I thought about Michael too. His calls had the same shape: work stress, immigration pressure, bills, winter, loneliness, plans, problems. I listened. I encouraged. I prayed. I laughed when laughter was needed. I became home through a scream, but when the call ended, I remained alone in a house nobody asked about. That was when I realized something painful. My children still needed me. They just no longer knew me. Not Grace, not the woman, only Mom, the one who answers, the one who understands, the one who does not require anything. For days, that realization followed me. I tried to push it away. I cooked. I cleaned. I went to church. I smiled at neighbors. But every quiet moment brought it back. Who was I when nobody needed me? One afternoon, while looking for an old receipt, I opened a drawer I had not touched in years. At the back, beneath old documents and faded envelopes, I found a notebook. The cover was worn, the pages were yellow. I almost put it back. Then I saw my handwriting, Grace, my own name, written by my own hand. I sat on the floor and opened it. At first, it was ordinary market lists, school fees, church notes, things to buy, things to fix, things to remember. Then I turned a page and felt my chest tighten. I'd written about a fabric shop, not once, many times. A small shop. Nothing big. Just a place where I could sell beautiful materials, a place with color, a place with willing coming in to talk, laugh, choose fabric, share stories, a place that belonged to me. I read the words again and again. I had forgotten that was what hurt, not that the dream failed, not that life interrupted it. I had forgotten it ever existed. I sat there with the notebook on my lap, feeling like I had found the body of a woman I once abandoned. A younger Grace, a Grace who wanted things, a Grace who had dreams before school fees became urgent, before visas, before hospital bills, before widowhood, before motherhood swallowed every other name. I cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the tears to fall onto the page, because suddenly I understood something I was not ready to understand. Maybe my children did not leave and make me lonely. Maybe they left and exposed the loneliness I had buried under responsibility. Thought frightened me. It also freed me a little. Because if my children were not the whole wound, then maybe they could not be the whole cure. The following Thursday, Mrs. Johnson invited me to a women's fellowship meeting. I almost refused. I had refused many times before. Too many questions. Too many women talking about their children. Too many reminders of what I was trying not to feel. But that day I said yes. The meeting was noisy, women greeting, laughing, praying, talking over one another. At first, I regretted coming. Then an older woman sat beside me. Her name was Mrs. Parker. She had kind eyes and a voice that sounded like it had survived many disappointments. We talked for a while. Nothing serious. Then she said, without looking directly at me, "My children live far away too." I turned to her. She smiled gently. "I used to wait for them to make me happy." I said nothing. She continued, "Then one day I realized they were living the life I prayed for them to have. I was the one who had forgotten to live mine." Those words entered me quietly, but they stayed after the meeting. I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, because something inside me was shifting. For years, I had believed my problem was that my children did not call enough. Maybe that was only part of it. Maybe the deeper problem was that I had built my entire life around being called. That night, I opened a notebook again. The fabric shop appeared on 3 different pages. Each time, the handwriting looked hopeful, almost young. I touched the page. Then I whispered something I had not said in years. "What do you want, Grace?" The question sounded strange in my own mouth, but it also sounded necessary. A week later, I asked a woman at the market about empty shops. She gave me a foreign number. I saved it as fabric shop contact. Then I stared at it for days, afraid to call, afraid not to call, afraid to discover that I still wanted something for myself. On Sunday afternoon, I sat in the parlor with my phone on the table. For once, I was not waiting for it to ring. I was staring at Michael's name. My heart beat fast. For years, I had told myself I did not call first because I did not want to disturb him. But the truth was uglier. I was afraid he would not answer. I was afraid of hearing impatience in his voice. I was afraid of confirming that I had become optional. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I thought of the notebook, the forgotten dream, the woman I had left behind, and before fear could stop me, I called. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then Michael answered. "Mom?" His voice sounded different, tired, heavy, almost broken. I tried to speak lightly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was silence, long silence. Then my son breathed out like someone who had been holding pain for years. "Mom?" he said quietly. "There is something I never told you about my life here." My hand tightened around the phone, and in that moment I realized I was not the only person in this family who had been suffering in silence. I don't think any mother is prepared for the moment she realizes her child has been protecting her. For years, I thought I was the one shielding Michael from worry. That night, I discovered he had been doing the same thing for me. The silence between us stretched. Then he spoke. "Mom, I wasn't doing well." His voice sounded small, smaller than I had heard it since he was a boy. I sat down slowly. What happened? For a moment, I thought he might change his mind. Then the words started coming, one after another. The way truth comes when it has been trapped too long. The first year in Canada had been harder than he told me, much harder. The scholarship covered school, not life. He worked nights, studied during the day, slept whenever he could. Sometimes only 3 or 4 hours, sometimes less. He skipped meals, lied about being fine, lied about succeeding, lied because every time he imagined telling me the truth, he remembered the sacrifices that brought him there. "I couldn't tell you I was struggling." His voice cracked. "You sold land for me." I closed my eyes. The land, I had forgotten about it. He never had. "You gave up so much." "Michael, I couldn't tell you I was failing." The word hit me, failing. My son, the confident young man who always looked like he knew what he was doing. The boy everybody praised. The boy who boarded a plane carrying our family's hopes. Failing. Not academically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, humanly. There were months he barely spoke to anyone outside work and school. Months when he came home to an empty apartment and sat in silence until he fell asleep. Months when he looked at family photographs and wondered if leaving had been a mistake. Months when he stared at his phone wanting to call him, but didn't, because he knew I would hear the sadness in his voice. "I didn't want you worrying." I laughed. A broken laugh, a mother's laugh, the kind that arrives when something hurts and heals at the same time. For years, I thought my son had stopped calling because he had moved on. The truth was far more heartbreaking. He was surviving. And survival leaves little energy for conversation.
I missed you every day. The words came quietly, almost ashamed. I felt tears sliding down my face. Not because he missed me, because I had spent years believing he didn't, because all those Sundays I sat alone thinking I was forgotten. My son was sitting alone in another country carrying guilt I never asked him to carry. We talked for almost 2 hours, longer than we had talked in years. For the first time, neither of us pretended. Neither of us performed. Neither of us protected the other from the truth when the call ended. I sat in silence. Not the painful silence I had known for years, a different silence, a softer one, a silence filled with understanding. The next week, Sarah called. This time, I didn't hide. When she asked how I was, I told her, not everything, not dramatically, just honestly. I've been lonely. The silence that followed felt familiar. The silence of someone realizing they missed something important. Mom? I heard tears in her voice immediately. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed, because the answer was simple, because I thought good mothers weren't supposed to, because I spent 61 years believing love meant carrying pain quietly, because nobody taught me that people cannot help with burdens they cannot see. Sarah cried. Then she told me things she had never said before, about crying alone after difficult shifts, about spending birthdays by herself, about eating dinner in silence, about pretending she was happy because everyone back home expected success stories. I listened, and suddenly I saw it. Not just my daughter, not just my son, people. Two human beings carrying their own disappointments, their own loneliness, their own fears. For years, I had reduced our relationship to one painful question. Why don't they call more? The real question was deeper. How had all three of us become experts at hiding our pain from one another? A few weeks later, I called the number saved in my phone, the fabric shop contact. My heart was racing. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes when it ended. I sat staring at the wall, half excited, half terrified. I had just agreed to view a small shop space, a real one, not a dream. Not a memory, a possibility. The shop was tiny, smaller than I imagined. The paint needed work, the shelves were old, the roof leaked slightly near the back. When the owner finished showing me around, he waited for my reaction. I looked around the room and something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I saw a future that had nothing to do with waiting for a phone call. Not because I loved my children less, because I was finally remembering how to love myself too. 3 months later, the shop opened. It wasn't perfect, nothing about it was perfect, but it was mine. Women came in every day. Some bought fabric, some came to talk, some stayed longer than necessary. I didn't mind. The shop gave me something I hadn't realized I needed. Not money, purpose. The days stopped revolving around my phone. Sometimes Michael called. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes Sarah called. Sometimes she didn't. The difference was that their calls were no longer carrying the full weight of my happiness. I still missed them. Of course I did. Love doesn't disappear, but missing them was no longer the center of my life. One Thursday evening after closing the shop, I sat outside watching the sunset. My phone rang. Michael. A few minutes later, Sarah joined the call. The three of us talked. Not because somebody had a problem. Not because somebody needed money. Not because somebody was struggling. Just because. Halfway through the conversation, I stopped talking and listened. They were laughing, teasing each other, sharing stories. For a moment, it felt like the old days. Then I realized something important. It wasn't the old days, and that was okay. Because families are not supposed to stay the same forever. Children grow, lives change, distance happens, love adapts. That night, after the call ended, I sat alone in my house, the same walls, the same rooms, the same silence. but everything felt different because I finally understood something I wish someone had told me years earlier. My story was never about children who left. It was about a woman who stopped living while she waited for them to come back. For years, I thought my children were the missing piece of my happiness. They weren't. They were part of it. The beautiful part, an irreplaceable part, but not the whole of it. I loved my children enough to let them build their lives. The mistake I made was forgetting to build mine. I am 61 years old. I still miss my children. I probably always will. But I no longer spend my nights waiting for a phone call. I no longer measure love by how often a screen lights up. I no longer confuse sacrifice with disappearance. The phone still sits on the table, face up. The difference is that it no longer represents hope. It represents connection. If it rings, I smile. If it doesn't, I still have a life waiting for me in the morning. And if there is one thing I have learned from all of this, it is this. Loving people deeply does not mean losing yourself inside their lives. Because one day the children grow up. One day they move away. One day the house becomes quiet. And when that day comes, the person left sitting in that silence should not be a stranger. For years, I was waiting for my children to come back and find me. What finally changed my life was learning to find myself.